Celebrating Disability Pride Month. At the Rainbow's End by Clare Summerskill. A script in hand online performance from Artemis Theatre Company, supported by Regard, Arts Council England, and the National Lottery Community Fund. Presented by Together 2012. I'm Ju Gosling, the Artistic Director of Together 2012 CIC, and I'm very proud to welcome you all to this script in hand performance of Clare Summerskill's At the Rainbow's End, presented by members of Artemis Theatre Company. The play is based entirely on interviews with older LGBTQI+ people who've experienced homophobia and transphobia in care settings or in their own home when receiving care. Just to give you a quick bit of audio description, I'm a white woman with pale olive skin and green eyes behind black plastic glasses. I'm wearing a purple trilby hat and over crop-tenored hair, a white t-shirt with the Together 2012 logo on it, and silver-coloured jewellery. This performance takes place as part of Disability Pride Month, and it's been sponsored by Regard, the National LGBTQI+ Disabled People's Organisation. Many thanks to Clare and to Regard for bringing it to Together 2012 CIC, and also to Arts Council England for funding Together 2012 CIC's events programme. Thanks as well to Paul Michaels, who is providing the British Sign Language interpretation tonight, and to Global Real-Time Captioning for the captions. You can access the captions via the captions button on your screen. It's usually at the bottom, or check the live chat for a link to the transcript if you would prefer that. I'm particularly proud to welcome Clare and Artemis tonight because I'm a 62-year-old lesbian who's had social care needs for many years. And of course, I've experienced discrimination on multiple occasions from providers. I've also been proud to represent the interests of LGBTQI+ social care users via Regard. I'm one of the authors of the NICE guidelines on improving adults' experience of social care, and I gave oral evidence to the Women and Equalities Committee inquiry into LGBT health and social care, I think in 2019. I'm not able to access social care at all at the moment, though, partly because I was forced to move by COVID, and our health, social care and benefits packages are not portable, and partly because PPE isn't funded for social care workers unless it's to protect them, not the client. And I have what is quaintly described by the medical system as a deficient immune system. Unsurprisingly, some of the content of At the Rainbow's End makes for somewhat uncomfortable listening. This work is intended to raise awareness of forms of discrimination that LGBTQI+ people fear and have experienced, and it shines a light on the importance of understanding the specific challenges faced by older and disabled LGBTQI+ people. I'm very hopeful that we'll have time for a few questions at the end, so please do use the live chat to ask these, as well as to give feedback and make any points. You can also use the reactions buttons to give virtual applause and love. So I encourage you to do that as well. Now I'm going to switch myself off and welcome Artemis Theatre Company.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Ju, and thank you to everyone who's on this call. This is just amazing. What a fantastic event. I'm Clare Summerskill. I'm the playwright, and I write plays in the style of verbatim theatre, which means that verbatim means word for word, and I write plays so that everything, every word that you're going to hear in this play is something that has been said to me in an interview by a real person. So it's not fictionalized, it's word for word from interviews. So without any further ado, let me introduce you to the cast.
Hello, I'm Richard. I'm playing Noel.
Hi, I'm Chris Rochester and I'll be playing Ted.
Hi, I'm Sam and I'm playing Robin.
Hello, I'm Karen and I'm playing Sylvia.
And I'm Claire and I'm playing the part of Maggie.
At the rainbow's end.
How did we first meet? On my doorstep. I lived in Greenwich and Sylvia came to my house and knocked on the door. I opened the door. There she was, this sparkly person. Personality sparkly, not what she was wearing, which was a beige coat.
No, it wasn't. It was grey.
Was it?
I remember it well.
Go on, you say why you came to see me.
Well, I was a married woman, very respectable, Roman Catholic, with 2 children and cracking up because I was having to deal with my sexuality at the age of 38. I managed to repress it up until then, but decided I could go on no longer, and I went to the
Sappho in Euston, yes, London, run by Jackie Forster.
That's right. She ran it and she was so nice to me the first time I went, because I think it is a shattering experience. For the first time in my life, I found myself in a room full of lesbian women telling myself, these are my people. This is what I am. And it was really terrifying and exciting. And I inquired, was there a group for Catholic women? And I was told, yes, there is. And I was given a contact number, and that is how I ended up on your doorstep. I needed a woman who knew what it would be like to be a Catholic, married with children.
No, I'd been exactly the same 7 years before, and I just walked out from my husband and children. I couldn't negotiate with him. He didn't want to know. All he wanted was to be left alone in peace. So I left him alone in peace with the kids, who wouldn't have given him any peace. It took a lot of thinking and facing up to, but in the end I thought, let them get on with the whole thing, because I'm happy and they're not. They can always come and approach me, but they never did.
And I realised, God, this woman knows. She can resonate with what I'm feeling. And I thought you had a lot of confidence. And I thought, I want to be like this. I want to be confident and happy about my sexuality. And as it was, I was having a terrible struggle with my ex-husband, who was my husband then, trying to persuade him to leave me with the 2 children and go and live with his mother. But he dug in. And I think there was this feeling in the family of, oh, it's a phase, you know, perhaps it's early onset menopause, but it's a phase. And I couldn't persuade them how serious I was. And in the end, I walked out and I didn't look back, really. Well, I did look back at the rubble I'd left behind. And then I saw this woman and I thought, she's fantastic. You know, she's confident, she's intelligent. I hadn't mixed a lot with intelligent people. And there you were, and you were stimulating. You'd got it. You were fantastic. But 42 years on, both of us could say something slightly different.
Then when I was on the verge of becoming 70 and you were 3 years behind.
Yes, and Berwick upon Tweed had always been a lodestone for you, hadn't it?
Yes.
Berwick was where you were happy as a child. We talked it over and I said to you, I think we ought to make plans for our old age and retirement because we don't want to get old where we live in.
Ban it? No.
Because you didn't like it that much. But then this 2-bedroom flat came up near the Scottish border in a retirement community scheme run by a housing association.
It was lovely.
So we took it.
There was a sister scheme opposite up the road with rented flats, and the resident manager from there would call in on us 1 day a week.
And we moved in the September. Beautiful autumn, wasn't it? The hills were all lovely and the trees.
It was a lovely little town. but we came to grief there.
In about 2017, my partner, Noel, was diagnosed with dementia. He had two particular forms. One was vascular cognitive impairment, and the other was Lewy body dementia. I first met Noel in the early meetings of the Gay Liberation Front, where they'd moved from the London School of Economics, where GLF was founded, to Powis Square in Notting Hill. He was at various meetings, and I saw Noel, and Noel saw me, and we became quite friendly over time. And he was one of the people who decided, along with me, to move into one of the 5 or 6 communes that were set up by the Gay Liberation Front.
The first location that we had was in Bounds Green, in a place called, not coincidentally, Queen's Road. But then we moved to a new location on Bounds Green Road. I think there were 12 men and 2 women in one flat. We all had our mattresses in the living room on the floor, back-to-back mattresses.
You had to step over various people snogging and carrying on to get to your mattress at night.
We used to have think-ins where we would sit and discuss the issues around homosexuality, about our place in society, what our aims were, what our role was. And at one point, we concluded that every single gay, bisexual, and lesbian person had grown up in a heterosexual environment. And we thought it would be to our massive advantage if, for a while, we moved in together and set up our own rules, our own way of being, our own criteria. And so we had these communes, and each commune had its own character.
The commune that we were in was comparatively conservative. We all had jobs. Most of us went to work at 9 o'clock in the morning, like other people, and we dressed according to the traditions of our gender.
Whereas the Notting Hill fairies, and that's what they called themselves, well, they used to challenge us and say that we should wear drag because it was a liberating thing, and they wore makeup.
Many of them were on the dole because they refused to work for straight society, although they worked very, very hard helping others in the LGBT community and did sterling work on the gay switchboard, for example, or setting up the first ever gay newspaper in Britain, Gay News. So yes, Noel and I started to get closer while we were living in the commune, and in the face of actually some criticism, because one of the ideas that the communes concluded was that we did not want to replicate traditional nuclear roles, family roles, and it wasn't widely approved for 2 people to be getting together in a relationship with each other because, of course, that was considered to be conventional.
But we stuck it out, and the criticism wasn't intense. It was just simply, let's try and be revolutionary. Let's break the rules. It wasn't outright condemnation. The communes lasted around 2 or 3 years, and then we moved out of necessity because our needs changed, the rents changed, and we moved from Bounds Green to Muswell Hill and then to Penge.
I think the communes broke up around 1974 or 5, and Noel and I set out on our own together. Noel and I first met in 1971, and we were together for 50 years.
I'm Mr. Robin Brooke, but I'm going to become Lord Robin Brooke just for a laugh, because I sent off for a legal document to do it, and I think titles are not what they seem, and it's going to be funny to see how different people react to me, and I'm looking forward to sending it off to the benefits office. I would love to be a fly on the wall and see their faces. So I'm coming up to 61 years old. I live in a housing association and my flat's for a wheelchair user. I have various disabilities. And when I was 20, I spent 8 months in hospital with 3rd-degree burns. I'm lucky I survived that. That was through an attack of somebody who was staying in my flat. They ended up in psychiatric care because of their drug habit. So I had to relearn how to walk, which I did. And then gradually other illnesses crept in because my body, I think, had had such a hammering. And I have quite a number of chronic illnesses. And gradually I had to, I got assessed as needing to use a wheelchair and having to receive care.
When it became clear that Noel's dementia was something that needed more attention than I could give him, they suggested that he go into a care home. And as I was told by the authority who's responsible for intakes into the hospital where Noel was, that they would discuss with me Noel's needs specific to the type of dementia that he was suffering from, and that I should investigate the different care homes around Lambeth because they would want me to approve of whatever home they chose. But one day, I got a call from the hospital to tell me that Noel had been moved into a care home in Croydon, a care home I'd never heard of in a different borough from where I lived, without my authority. And this is my first indication that perhaps they didn't take our relationship seriously, because when Noel went into the hospital, I gave them my civil partnership documents. We'd had a civil partnership in 2017. I was Noel's litigation friend because there were some legal documents and aspects to what was happening to him, and I had power of attorney. And I'd given the hospital all of those details, but they just moved him. And it was a recorded message. I couldn't even argue with the phone call because it was just...
Mr. Brown, this is to let you know that your partner has been moved to a home in Croydon.
It could have been Outer Mongolia as far as I was concerned. So I went to Croydon. I was very upset, but there seemed very little I could do, and they argued with me that...
Now that he is in this new home, it would be harmful for his dementia to be disturbed and moved to another home straight away.
Noel had been in the care home for just a couple of weeks, and one day at 10 a.m., I was sent an email by some social aspect of the care system saying, "We are going to conduct a first assessment of your father this afternoon at 2 p.m. They already had all my documents, and my surname is Brown. I was 69 at the time, and I'm black. Noel at the time was 76. He's white, and his surname is Glynn. There is no way anybody could mistake us for father and son." So I stormed into the meeting saying, "This doesn't inspire confidence in me that you are conducting this properly, and why was I not invited?" I do remember a number of times when I asked questions during that first assessment, and they asked me,
Is there someone else we could speak to who had some kind of authority over Noel?
"I'm his partner." I'm sure if we'd been a heterosexual couple and I'd been Noel's wife, then they wouldn't have said that to me, you know? And their first question to Noel was to assess if his perception was adequate in terms of knowing where he was. And they asked him,
Do you know where you are living? Is this your home, or is it somewhere else that you're living in?
and Noel's reply was,
I don't like it here. They beat me up.
My trans journey. I knew I always fancied women. I grew up in a place, though, where I was abused, and I really didn't want to be a man because I thought of abuse. But then I realised I was living life as a lie. And yes, I could call myself a practicing lesbian because I kept on practicing at being it, but I couldn't get it right because it really wasn't me. And then I accepted myself as being a trans man. But at that time, nothing was said about the gay community, and definitely not about being a trans person. I grew up in Southampton in what was mainly a military family. When my brother went to secondary school, I said to my mum, "Oh, you've made a real mistake. When I get to the same age as my brother, I will end up going to Merrick Boys' School, and you will realise that I'm a boy and not a girl." I got the biggest hiding of my life. But then when that thing happened, the monthly thing, I cried my eyes out because I thought, now even my body's let me down. My mum signed my brother into the Navy when he was 16, and I knew the same thing was going to happen to me when I finished school, so I left home. My mum then disowned me, and I knew she wouldn't accept me being a trans man. And she was the only parent that I can remember, and I always wanted her to accept me. And you know, you want your mum's help. She finally started talking to me, but we had a difficult relationship, and I didn't want her to disown me when she was getting older, so I waited till she died before I started my transition. I was about 43 the first time I got seen by a psychiatrist who diagnosed me as having gender dysphoria. And then when I started on hormones, you know, some people said that being on testosterone would make me more aggressive, whereas people that I knew turned around and said that I'm so much calmer. And I found that the self-harm stopped, the hating myself stopped, and I found the peace within myself that I wouldn't have found if I didn't do my journey. And it's never too late for somebody to start your journey, because if you are trans, that's the only way you'll find your peace, because your brain's not fighting what your body is, because the two are different. I may be in my 60s, but now I have peace with myself that I didn't have when I was a teenager and growing up.
Actually, when we first moved in there, they were delighted. They wanted us to get involved in this and involved in that. And we had done a civil partnership, hadn't we?
And we thought that that signalled all over the country that we'd be okay. And I think it was about January, we were given forms, peace of mind forms they were called, and they wanted information about illnesses and
next kin,
that sort of thing, which all seemed very reasonable. But then they wanted, at the top, they wanted our relationship to each other. But it was usually for Mr. and Mrs. So instead of married, we put CP. All hell broke loose after that.
Within literally, I think, about 48 hours.
Yeah.
I was playing the piano.
At the other complex?
Yeah, the one with the shared manager.
But run by the same company. And we walked into the room, and this couple who lived opposite us and their mates, they all suddenly got up and walked out. And I thought, oh, what's that about then? Anyway, we sat down and there seemed to be no one from our complex there, was there?
No, because this guy was the alpha male. They were a married couple. They were our nearest neighbours in our block of flats, and he was the alpha, wasn't he?
People were afraid of him because he'd bullied before. He'd reduced one woman to the mental hospital.
Yeah.
Depression. Because he'd kept on about what she was having done to her flat and it shouldn't be done and what it was costing and what have you. He was an A1 bully. But we didn't know this, but he persuaded all of them to avoid us. He actually said to new people who came in,
"Don't have anything to do with those two women."
Well, of course, we wondered how he knew. But then it was quite obvious that people from the Housing Association, one man in particular, the Community Development Officer.
The fruit fly.
Yeah, we called him the fruit fly.
Because it somehow made him, oh, I would have gone like that to him if I could.
He used to come and have breakfast with various people, and he had told somebody. So there was a breach of confidentiality.
We can't prove it, and we didn't know it, but it got worse and worse. I was asked not to go and play the piano and do singing with the people opposite.
And people were avoiding us, weren't they?
One day, the fruit fly organised a shopping trip to Newcastle.
So we put our names down for this trip. And suddenly, the names of everyone else was off. They'd scratched them out.
And well, it went on like that. So I asked the fruit fly if we could have a meeting with, we call them the blobbies because they were big.
Yeah, that's Sylvia who comes up with the nicknames.
Yeah, it helps me to cope with them.
So they were the blobbies, the bullies.
The husband and wife team that were the sort of alpha couple.
So I asked for this meeting and I said, you're not to come, because I could see that Sylvia was getting in a stew, and he turned up without his wife. There was the fruit fly, and I think that's all. And I said, why is it you don't like us? Why are you not speaking to us? I want to know the reason. And he wouldn't answer. And this went on for a long time. And then he said,
Well, you opened the window on the landing.
I said, why is that wrong?
Because the draft goes right under our door.
Well, if that's a problem, I can get you a draft excluder.
I think we actually bought one, a draft excluder.
And we didn't open the window again, but he was having too good a time, wasn't he? It was obvious. But it was getting us down because there were so many other people. I hadn't opened windows on everyone's front door, you know?
But when we went out, Mag, the entranceway to this place, it didn't have any communal room, but the entranceway was nicely laid out with 2 tables and some chairs around them. But they altered it, and they put the chairs in a sort of horseshoe shape, half moon, so that as we came through the door in the afternoon, they would all be sitting there and they would watch us.
And we'd say good afternoon.
And nobody would answer. But it was all very nebulous, what was happening to us. I mean, apart from the walking out, whenever we were around, they would walk out of the room, wouldn't they?
And there was a couple of people who did speak to us, but it had to be outside. And it was whispered in hurried conversation. They were very nice and they understood, and they didn't like the blobbies either, but they were terrified of them. I couldn't believe it. It was like living in a prison camp or something.
And we couldn't invite friends because they watched them. And we actually had gay friends living nearby that we couldn't invite because they would have outed them, you know. We had to see friends off the premises.
It was, an absolute nightmare.
Someone at the agency I was with, and they shouldn't do it, basically, by law, but they outed me to every single carer. Told the carer before they came to me that I was a trans man. And once I had a carer saying to me,
Isn't what you're doing against God?
and I said, no, what I'm doing is being who God intended me to be. God doesn't make mistakes. The human body can, and I'm living true to who God made me. And he was absolutely shocked. I've had times when carers have said,
well, in my country, they kill gay people.
I really didn't know what to say to that. But I just feel that there are times where I can't have my home with like anything to do with the LGBT community because of people's attitudes, and I have to hide that fact. If I see something on television against somebody from the LGBT community and I say it's not right, it's...
Oh, we don't want to hear about that.
Why not?
Because in our country, there isn't such a thing.
And once, when I was talking to a Nigerian carer, I mentioned that I knew a reverend who went back to Nigeria, and I said about him getting death threats for opening a church that is open to lesbian and gay people. And she said,
so he should.
And I said, you say you're a Christian, so what has giving death threats and violence got to do with Christianity? Doesn't it say to love one another?
Well, I believe that it's all wrong.
Well, you may believe that, but I don't want to hear about those kind of opinions in my home. I wish people would read the equal opportunities thing and realise that it means what it says, and that people's personal opinions, whether they base it on religious grounds or where they come from or whatever, they should be left at home and not brought into work. And receiving home care, I live by myself with my 2 cats. Sometimes I feel extremely vulnerable, especially when people have homophobic and transphobic attitudes, you know? It makes the atmosphere very, very uncomfortable. It narrows down my right to have my own opinions and be able to say what I believe is my truth in my home.
I can't remember the exact date, but I was called by a member of staff who said,
Is that Ted?
yes.
Okay, I need you to hold the phone to your ear and listen to what's happening to your partner.
So I did, and at one stage I could hear Noel's voice calling out,
Help!
and he was obviously in distress. And I decided I was going to the home to find out what was going on, and I called the police before I left the house. I said, I think my partner's being beaten up in his home, and I'm going there now. Could you send someone over? Noel was so distressed that when I got to the home, I stayed with him overnight and the next day. I insisted, because when I was about to leave, he'd said,
Don't leave me.
and the first night I borrowed his dressing gown so I could sleep on the floor. And the second night I slept under the blanket with him. So when I got home on that second night, I called the police to find out what had happened. And they said they hadn't sent anybody over to the home or done anything at all. They basically said,
Well, we've had calls from this home before, and this is what happens with residents, especially those who have dementia. They get excited, they get disturbed. We turn up there and they just get in a panic. Nothing to do with anything that's gone wrong to them. It's just them having a freak out.
after Noel had said they beat me up, the social worker I spoke to said,
We believe that some of the staff who've been at the home for quite a long time know ways of beating someone up and not leaving any marks.
but when I'd approached Noel to ask if he could pull up his shirt so I could see if there were any bruises, he'd just say things like,
That hurts.
and he wouldn't let anybody approach him. Then one time I visited Noel, I found cigarette burns on the back of his hand. Noel had picked up a cup of tea and I saw the marks on the back of his hand and I said to him, what's that? I said, can you turn your hand over? And he said,
Hurts.
but he wouldn't turn his hand over. And I have a vague suspicion that maybe the person who'd caused it was nearby. And Noel didn't want to show his hand to me while they were there, right? It didn't look like a cut, so I asked him how it happened. And he said,
Smoking.
Noel didn't smoke. But the staff and residents were allowed to smoke in the garden. So maybe some of the staff had taken him out and had done that to him. On one occasion, when I came into Noel's room, he flinched and put his hand up as if to protect his face. And then I realized that this is really bad. I have to find out what's going on, so I went to visit him with a friend of ours, Sarah, who was one of the Quakers. At first, Noel wouldn't let us raise his shirt, but Sarah gently held his hand. He knew her. And I lifted up his shirt, and I took a video of the bruises. I also called one of the staff over and said, use your own camera to take some pictures of this. I don't want it just to be my photographs, because they might say I'm faking it or something. The way that I discovered that some of the abuse that Noel was suffering was specifically homophobic was from a gay man and a lesbian who were also residents in the home. And I'd met them while I was visiting Noel, and the lesbian had said to me,
Don't do anything that lets people know that you're gay, because these people will get you. If we'd got to you sooner, we'd have advised you not to kiss Noel on the cheek and hold his hand like that, because you're letting people know that he's gay. We both have lovers who visit us as friends, but we can't say they're our partners. And I've actually got a civil partnership, but haven't mentioned it to anybody, because that would have let people know that we're gay, and we know that many people on the staff are homophobic, so we won't risk it.
and in the written account that the gay man and lesbian gave to the inquiry, they mentioned that Noel was walking along the corridor with some other residents, and two of the staff had said to him,
Are you a gay man? Do you like gay men?
and then they dragged him into his room, and everybody outside heard a tumult going on for a few minutes, like they were beating him up. In a safeguarding meeting that was held in March, the management said that they'd actually found 2 of the male staff that had abused Noel and dragged him into his room. They suspended them for 2 weeks, but then they'd brought them back to work and just put them on another floor.
We got in touch with the Housing Association,
Yeah, that's right.
saying there was bullying going on and can they do something about it? And they ignored it for a long time. And then when I spoke to the manager over in the other complex and I said to her, it's homophobic bullying, I think she had a gay son.
How did she?
And she said, this should be reported. It should go to the top.
And she made her report, but it came back saying that it must go through the usual channels.
So the CEO chucked it all the way down to the 2 office-based staff who were the lowest.
The ones who come to the porthole in the office and grin at you.
And they came to see us and we explained what was going on. They said,
We'll look into it.
One of the things said to us on that occasion was,
We can't make him talk to you if he doesn't want to.
it wasn't that. It was the fact that, you know, he'd got the whole bloody complex and they went away and it was 5 weeks and we hadn't heard anything. So we went along to the victim support. But the man there said to us,
You should move.
and we said, we can't move. We've bought the place, you know, we're stuck there. And he was very dismissive, but he got in touch with us a few days later because over the weekend, he'd spoken to his daughter and son-in-law about it and they had turned around and said, you've got to take this seriously.
this is a crime.
And we went to see him again and he was very good, wasn't he?
After that, yes.
After that, but he couldn't actually do anything. But he did say,
You shouldn't be waiting 5 weeks for a response.
he said we should have heard.
Write to them and say that your anxiety is being increased because of how you're being treated.
And we did. And they made an appointment to come and see us again. And the day that they came to see us, we saw the car arrive and then we saw Mr. and Mrs. Blobby walk out and the 2 people from the office stood with the Blobbies laughing and chatting. And I said to you, we've had it.
For 10 minutes, if not more.
They finally got up to us, didn't they? And they said,
We've investigated it, but there was nothing to investigate.
and he actually said twice,
You're playing the homophobic card.
we are not playing anything. We are desperate here. We're really desperate. And he said that twice on that visit.
And later on, he denied ever having said it.
And they went away and it went up to the next level and we had the next 2 people come along and we had to grind through it all over again and tell them what had happened.
And no one believed it, did they?
And then it went up to the next level and another 2 people. 6 members of staff we had trotted in here. And in the meantime, we went to the police.
Oh, yeah.
Because things were ramping up. One afternoon, when the chit-chat was taking place in the entrance hall, I went down and I sat there. And I thought, what am I going to do? And I chatted when I could join in. And suddenly, Mr. Blobby got onto his phone and he walked to the door. And I thought, who's he calling? Then, after about 10 minutes, Blobby jumped up and I was aware there was this tall bloke in his...
He'd arrived in a little red Mini with a Union Jack on top.
On the top of it. And he was dressed from head to foot in black and Blobby let him in and he stood in front of me and he said,
Now, what's all this about?
excuse me, I don't know who you are. I don't know your name.
You don't need to know that. What's it all about?
I am not speaking to you unless I know who you are. And I got scared and I left. He sat down. Obviously, everyone else there knew him.
He was the son, Blobby's son.
But unfortunately, we later learned that he was a police sergeant in the local police force. I'd said to you earlier, where did he get his confidence from with the staff and at the housing association? And of course, when it was revealed that his son was a sergeant in the police force, I thought, oh, that's what it is.
And they were all bloody afraid of him, weren't they?
At one point, Blobby said to me,
It's your gender I don't like.
what are you talking about, my gender? I'm a woman. What do you mean? But he couldn't explain. He just indicated his wedding ring, and he made other references to our not being normal, to hating me.
And that's when we thought we'd got him.
And we reported it to the police because it was a hate crime.
And we knew that.
We said it then.
And 2 policemen came to the flat, and I told them what had happened. And they said,
Ooh, you know, it will be very difficult. People are not going to tell the truth.
and they talked us out of making an official complaint.
Then we got offered mediation by the housing association, and we said yes, and we grabbed it.
But the Blobbies would only mediate if they stayed in their flat and we stayed in our flat.
I don't know why that was.
We couldn't sit round a table all together, but it had to be done. So we said,
well, we're desperate. Yeah, we'll do it. Anything.
and the mediator came along one evening.
And he was very nice, wasn't he?
Now, he went to see them first, and after about 20 minutes, he came to us. But while he was interviewing us, you, Sylvia, you saw that little car arrive with the Union Jack on top. So Sergeant Pepper was here again. And by the time he'd finished with us, was very optimistic. He said,
Well, there's no problem really on either side that can't be resolved.
and he went trotting back to them.
I was putting the kettle on to make him a cup of tea, and he came back. Jesus, he was scared, and he said,
Well, I don't know how we can actually go forward really, as we I'll have to call it a day for now.
and he left. And he was afraid, so that was the mediation out the window.
Can't leave things like hospital appointment letters out because it shouldn't have, but on some of them it does have that I'm on testosterone and that I'm fully female to male. So a carer could see it in my notes, and they shouldn't be picking up my personal letters and reading them, or anything of mine and reading it. But I've known that to happen, and it has happened to me. And I say, excuse me, put that down. It's not addressed to you, it's mine.
Oh, but it was there.
But it's not for you to read. I have some flags, but I won't put them up in the flat. And I have one rainbow flag with a peace sign. And I'm saying because of the war in Ukraine, I've got the peace sign up there. I have the right to live in my house and have in my house the things that mean something to me, you know? Have books that are written by people in our community on show in my house. I shouldn't have to feel like I should have to hide my belongings, but I do. I do have to hide them to feel safe. Because I believe that everybody should be able to feel comfortable and have any pictures they want on the wall, any books, anything about any subject, as long as it's not racist, fascist, or nastiness on display, because that's part of who the person is and what they want in their own home. And always feeling like having to hide part of yourself, it's not allowing me to be myself or anybody to be themselves in where they're living for fear of verbal abuse in the form of horrible transphobic and homophobic comments.
After the mediation fiasco, we never heard any more about that from the housing association. And they said there was nothing to investigate. There was no bullying going on. It wasn't happening. And I said, you said we were playing the homophobic card. And they denied it completely. It was just hopeless.
By this time, we realised we couldn't go to the police, we couldn't go to the housing association.
So finally, we moved out of the property.
We moved to a rented flat.
We were having to pay 2 lots of council tax, 2 lots of service charge.
And it was affecting us mentally.
And physically.
Oh, yeah, can't sleep, tearful, bad-tempered.
I mean, we look rough, didn't we? We look rough.
And I think I said to you, if we don't get out of here,
Yeah.
we're going down fast. Sylvia had just gone to pieces. I mean, I had to take her up to the moors on the bus.
To walk it out.
Yeah.
Because to be threatened like that in your own home.
It really affects you.
Yeah, it finishes you.
And to know that people you thought were going to give you support, like the Housing Association that boasted about its LGBTQ thingy, the police, and you think, I'm just drowning, you know? I can't do anything.
But we wrote to the police commissioner, didn't we?
Oh, yeah, we had another interview.
We were taken into separate rooms. I was asked questions about my experience. You were. It took an hour and a half to talk through it.
Oh, it took more than that. It was all morning.
All morning.
I was exhausted.
And then, just as we got to the bit where I was being intimidated
By the sun?
By the sun, they said,
Oh, well, we've got to stop now.
And they stopped. And I thought, I've not been able to tell you.
And there was a heck of a storm, wasn't there? Grey skies. And I was storming myself. I was so upset because they'd interviewed us up to the point when it got to the bit about Blobby's son being in the police, and then we were cut off and the interview ended.
There has to be understanding about the Equality Act and treating people as people. Doesn't matter where you come from or what your sexuality is, what your gender is, whether you're gender neutral, whether you're trans, whether you're heterosexual, whatever, you should be treated as a person. And if somebody makes me feel like rubbish, I'm sat in here with that feeling, and that can go around and around in my mind. And sometimes I've lost sleep over it. What could I have said differently? How could I have acted differently to not have this situation happen? You have to be treated as a person and not as some kind of freak, which I've ended up feeling. And I had to deal with my own transphobia and all the crap I internalized, you know? It did stop me for a while, quite a while, going through my journey and me wanting my mum to accept me for who I am, which wouldn't have happened in reality, but there was always that want there. And out of respect, because she brought me up, I waited till after she died. And then I could really begin to really live my life. And why should I have it restricted? Those people who come in are supposed to be helping me, and they're making me feel bad about myself because of their comments.
On the day that we were signing the rental agreement for the new flat, the CEO from the Housing Association came to see us.
To beg us to cancel.
We think it's because someone had told them that perhaps they could be sued if we moved out because there'd been a breach of confidentiality.
Yes, that's my suspicion.
That's the basis of it. But we said, you're too late. We can't cope anymore.
We've been to you for help. It hasn't been there. We're moving out.
And we did. We sold the flat, and then later we moved back to the southeast.
We finally went to court, and they pronounced there and then, saying,
This situation is inexcusable. Mr. Glynn should have been moved out in February. Here we are in September and nothing's happened.
And Lambeth agreed to give
Mr. Glynn, £29,000 in compensation for the abuse he suffered.
LGBT people who go into care homes now were the first generation that started the fight for rights, and they're now having to go back into the closet. People like Noel started off their youth under homophobic oppression. We all did, right? It was difficult for us back in the 50s and 60s when we were kids. Then we have, 20, 30 years of campaigning for LGBT rights. And now, in our 60s and 70s, we're having to go back into the closet because of the way these people are treating us now. In the youth movement, we're thinking, you know, we want to party. We want to get married. Well, we weren't thinking about some older LGBT people who had been rejected by their families. They don't have kids to back them up when they're in hospital or in care homes. And I wasn't, you know, I wasn't thinking about that.
We'd taken a civil partnership, and I think that gave us confidence. We thought we were protected in law.
We were.
We wasn't.
Well, we should have been.
We should have been, but we weren't.
The law was there on our side, but nobody wanted to apply it.
And it was so drip, drip, drip. We were afraid to come out our front door because he was opposite. And I always had this feeling that the people used to go into the flat when we were out.
Yes, I did too.
I couldn't prove it, but I just had this feeling that they would go in there when we were out.
Looking for evidence that we were disgusting.
Well, I had one gay man who was my carer. It made a real difference, mainly because, you know, of the abuse in the past. I wasn't comfortable with male carers, but his whole attitude was like,
I've worked with old ladies in the care homes. I've wiped their bums. I've seen everything they've got. You won't make no difference.
he made a joke of it, and that helped put me at my ease. With him, I didn't mind him doing personal care. It made such a huge difference to have somebody who knew who I am, my journey, and not have a bad attitude towards it. Be perfectly cool.
There's one part of who you are. You're a great person. I like your personality and I like your sense of humour.
And that took precedence over the fact that I'm trans, which just became part of who I am, not this big thing that has to be focused on.
I hate to admit it, but had I known, I would have gone to visit Noel as a friend and not mentioned about our civil partnership. I can't be there when these people are slapping him or, you know, taking a cigarette and stubbing it out on the back of his hand. But I'm not going to stand up and say, I have my rights, because it's going to be taken out on him. And the staff who did that to Noel, the one who made him flinch, maybe they just go in every time they see him and they slap him, right? But somebody who would take somebody who has dementia and can't run away and can't defend himself and stub out a cigarette on the back of their hands shouldn't be anywhere near a care home. So I'm visiting now. I found bruises on him. I'm leaving the building and I'm thinking as I'm going back to my home, is somebody now beating him up? And many of these people are in the last days of their lives. And you can guarantee that there are some people who have died looking up at the face of the person that abused them. That's the last thing they've seen. And we have to stop that. We have to do something.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you all so much. I hope you can see it, but there's lots of applause and lots of love coming up. We don't have very long, so I think like everybody else, none of this was a surprise to me, of course, you know, as somebody who's been representing myself and other social care users for so long. But I wanted to ask Claire, what inspired you to do this project, to start this project?
Well, I did a theatre project on this subject quite a while ago, actually, called Staying Out Late, that was a sort of workshop-based performance with older LGBT people. And that was quite a while ago, and like 10, 15 years ago. And I suppose I'm getting to that age when I'm thinking, well, what's happened? What's improved? What's changed? And as far as I know, a lot of trans people and lesbian and gay people, LGBT people, queer people are absolutely terrified of going into any form of home or into any form of care solely because of our sexual orientation or gender identity. And that just strikes me as really, really appalling. And so I just thought, well, I'm going to, keep trying to push the issue while I can, while I've got the energy and the means.
And I think it's so much appreciated. I mean, there's lots and lots of things compliments coming in, which I will share with the company afterwards. Everybody will be able, everybody in the company will see all of your comments. One question that I can answer, which is, yes, there is going to be a recording available of tonight. It won't be publicly listed on YouTube. You will need to access it via the Together 2012 events page. I can't promise exactly when it will be up, but it will definitely be up by early next week. And we keep things up in our archive, so you will be able to access that. I don't think we've ever had such a big audience or so much response, and I think that just shows you just how important this subject is. I wish I thought things were improving, but I think sadly, of course, with all of the rise in hate crime, the loss of social care staff because of Brexit, if anything, unfortunately, I would say things are getting worse. And actually, there's lots of us who are now left after decades of using social care without any social care at all. We do have another 5 minutes. I wondered if I could ask the company, perhaps you could go around in the order that you were used to sitting in the library, how you felt about taking part in this production, because it must have been very demanding.
Anyone?
Who'd like to start, Richard?
Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, well, I first became aware of this play when Claire asked me to do it last year, and we did it for a special feature on Channel 4 News, which was really great that they have that slot, and that was incredibly powerful and difficult to read about these subjects. I had no idea, like a lot of people, I just had no idea about it. And yeah, it was just a shock to the system to know that in this day and age where you've got a whole generation coming through who take our freedoms for granted, that those freedoms could be kind of lost in the latter stage of life. And not only lost, but the abuse that can accompany that as well. So yeah, I felt like it was a really important thing to be doing, and it felt very meaningful. It feels very meaningful to do a piece like this to people who are working in the care sector or have some influence over the care sector, and that feels it feels really encouraging, actually, that we can be part of shedding a light on that issue. So yeah, incredibly grateful to Claire for producing this piece of work and for being in it.
Karen, did you have something you'd like to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's like, I think we all of us in this room, in this virtual room now, we do know how, for many, many years now, the care system has been broken, and there's not been enough money going in it, enough support going in it, enough there to support people correctly and properly, and we know that. And then you put on top of that there are people from our community terrified of and having to go back into the closet after taking that time, like all of us have gone on that journey. Every single one of us have gone on that journey when we've struggled and been scared, and then at last gone, no, fuck it, this is who I am. I'm fucking proud of it. And it really breaks me that two amazing women their story is about those two women thinking that they were going to do something, live together and have this wonderful time together and go to the retirement community home and be in this beautiful place that was, you know, so beautiful and full of colour and life, and to be psychologically bullied and made to go back into the closet. It's just terrifying, that, you know. But again, I am so grateful as well to Claire and to everyone else in the cast and to all of you coming to this now, because this is what gives me hope, that actually what I can do in a small way as an actor, what I can do with my bit of skill is support these words to get out there, these really important things to get out there, for us all to sit here together and go, this is right, what we're going to do. And that I just can, you know, from seeing people's things being written, I can just feel that we're not going to let this drop. This is the beginning of being active. This is how we should be using theatre and creative work, is to be activists in the way that we can be. So it's amazing.
I'm just very briefly going to come to Chris and Sam before we finish. So Chris.
Hi, I'm relatively new to this this project, and one thing that really strikes me is that, you know, I met Ted, and firsthand, and he showed me all the, you know, the case lives in him. It's his raison d'etre. It's his reason to be, and he's still fighting. And like, the words are so powerful. You know, I mean, this must be one of the first performances I've really choked up and struggled to get through that last speech. And the thing about it is, it's on all of our doorsteps. The actual home that Noel was in is basically around the corner from where I live in Croydon. So it's, you know, I just want to end on that. It's just, you know, a very important thing I had absolutely no knowledge of. Within a mile of
I think
road.
that's a really important point, Chris. This isn't something that's happening somewhere else. And Sam, can I come to you last?
I think that's really sort of like a big part of what it's like for me as well. I know Robin, who I'm playing. He's a friend as well, and you know, that whole sort of like connection with, I mean, his story has got parallels with my own story as a trans guy, older trans guy. Obviously, lots of differences as well, but that aspect of, I came out first time round, way back against the background of Section 28 coming in. All right, and you think naturally that things are going to get better after that, after it got repealed and that, and here we are again. You know, particularly with the transphobia that is just brutal and never ending at the moment. It's like we're back there again. And, you know, my background has been working often with young people. And now I am like very much focused, as I'm getting older now, what we're going to do as older LGBT people as well, because we've still got the fight. We've still got the struggle. La luta continua, you know, it's going on, and we're not going to be quiet.
And I would just like to say one final thing, of course, which is that we still have many, many young LGBTQI plus people who are disabled, who need social care, who are either trapped in the closet at home with their parents, or indeed the most common form of housing for young disabled people is old people's care homes. So let's not forget, you know, I'm 62, but let's not forget the 22-year-olds and the 16-year-olds and 18-year-olds as well. I've just got time to thank you again from the bottom of my heart, all of you, and of course, Claire, but all of you as a company, everybody who's come tonight, everybody who's supported it. We will be putting out as much of the information that we've shared in the chat as we possibly can, technology permitting. And as I said, this recording will be publicly available from next week. And I'm sure as a play, we're just seeing the beginning of the journey that the play is going to go on. So yeah, thank you all so much again. And thank you as a social care user tonight. I do not feel as alone as I think many of us often do. So it's been a very emotional, special night for me too. And I think all of us, Disability Pride Month is not just about disability. It's about us as disabled LGBTQI plus people, as people of colour, as younger people, as older people, disabled people. We shouldn't just be looking at putting these issues into LGBT plus Pride Month. We need to be looking at them all the time. And I'm just so appreciative to Claire to bringing us this production and enabling us with regard to put it on for Disability Pride Month. So thank you all so much again, and good night.
Thank you.
Join in from home with Together 2012, www.together2012.org.uk. Supported using public funding by Arts Council England and the National Lottery Community Fund.